Hey, I'm Jim Rogers, and welcome to Thoughts from the Field. You know, I've spent my entire life in the construction industry, my entire working life in the construction industry, and I've always seen us spend just many, many hours of our day looking for information, looking for data. Where's this RFI? What submittals are still due? Which version of the plans are we on? And we've always struggled with this in the construction industry. But I think now that we're becoming more digitized, we can really start to better harness all this data that we gather. And that's what I'm going to talk about today with my guest, Robin Hunt, here on Thoughts from the Field. All right, again, welcome to Thoughts from the Field. I'm going to start with a little bit of news, maybe a little bit of follow-up from last week's live stream and conversation. It's always nice when I can start with some good news. So I like I've say in most of these, I really like to follow Engineering News Record. I think it's a great source of news, really worldwide for the construction industry. And I just found this piece of information or this piece of news here: contracting firms expect recovery to improve during 2021. Just kind of goes towards what I've been discussing for the last month or so. We're really seeing this big surge in the construction industry, and so it's really time to start looking at these things that we're talking about in Thoughts from the Field, like supply chain management, and like we'll talk about today, harnessing and analyzing data. So kind of in that data theme, and I'm going to really try and throw in a safety topic at the beginning of every one of these live streams. So in that data theme, I found kind of a new product here, a new smart PPE system that monitors workers' heat stress and sweat rate. And last week, of course, we spent a lot of time talking about working in the heat and heat stress. And I'm just curious if anybody is using either the one that I just had up on the screen, which is a wearable instrument that monitors people's perspiration and exposure to heat and gives the employer like this hourly data of how all their employees are doing, kind of that Internet of Things and wearable technology. I'm just curious if anyone out there in the construction industry is actually using things like that. And if you are, I'd really like to see some comments in the comment section here in the live stream, and be happy to discuss those with you. It's one more opportunity to get more data from our workers in the field, our employees in the field, and like I say, I'm just wondering if anybody's using anything like that, and if they're harnessing that data. My last thing on wearables is more of a self-serving thing, because I really want to hear from you on hard hats. So I have some of my clients in the U.S. switching from our old construction style hard hats to these new helmets. They almost look like a biking helmet. They're in the U.S. This is kind of a new innovation. I know in much of the rest of the world, or some parts of the rest of the world, you all have switched to these helmets probably several years ago. But we're really just starting to switch to this newer helmet technology in the U.S. And again, if you have switched from the old construction style hard hats to these helmets, I would really like to hear from you in the comment section. Just kind of understand what your experiences are, why you switched, and how the reception's been to the new helmets and the new technology out there in the field. All right, with that, what I would like to do is introduce our guest this morning. Let me add Robin to the stream. Good morning, Robin.
Hi.
Or it's morning for me. I think you're about halfway across the country, so you're a little closer to lunch, right?
I'm a little bit closer to lunch.
All right.
Which means when we're done, we're done.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
I
also brought my hard hat.
And Robin's got her hard hat. Excellent. And
yeah.
you actually told me a story about that hard hat.
Yeah. So that's my dad's hard hat. I grew up with paper makers in my family. They all worked at the paper mills. Most of them came out of the shipyards, worked on naval ships, and then went into the paper mills. And so I grew up around paper mills my whole life. Lived with my dad working swing shift, so he would swing from midnights to day shift. a very hardworking person, would work 12-hour shifts. And really, he was actually preparing me for what my life would look like as an entrepreneur. I have to constantly remind my mom, she'll be like, "You're working really hard." I'm like, "I'm not working any harder than Daddy," and so that really calms her down a little bit. So yeah, I have a passion for all things related to what people would traditionally consider, I guess, blue collar work.
Sure.
Is what I was telling you earlier. Like, I really have a heart for construction because I feel like I'm around my uncles and my aunts and my dad, uh, and just real practical. Like, I feel like I have a practical approach to data. I look at it like we're producing something, no different than any other type of production. So yeah, I'm excited to be here, and also excited to hear you mention safety, which is something near and dear to my heart as well.
Sure.
I think that that's important to have those safety conversations pretty much on the regular. Again, with my dad being part of the safety at the mill, it was an everyday part of our life. And seeing the impacts of, what not having a strong safety practice can do to a family when they lose someone. I've also experienced that in my life. So yeah, I'm all about it. I geek out about data, but when you start talking about construction and data and construction, I get super geeked. So I hope everybody's prepared.
Yeah, well, and that's
that.
so, I just by way of a little more introduction here, I knew, I let's see if I can blow that up a little bit. I knew Robin. Robin's a fellow LinkedIn Learning instructor, right? So I see her in the instructor meetings every month, and we've talked. And Robin's got 8 courses in the library now, with I think part 2 of that top one coming out, right?
Yeah,
Learning data analytics.
Yeah.
But when you go through the courses, it's it's learning data analytics, building dashboards for Excel, building solutions using Excel, just general learning data analytics, and they're great courses. But I kind of hadn't put it together with construction. So when I said I was going to do these live streams every Wednesday morning, Robin said, "Well, we need to get on together and talk about data and construction." And then as we started talking, you said, "No, I've got a bunch of construction clients. I've got clients that use some of these, data collection tools, if you will, in the field, Procore and PlanGrid, some of these things, and I work for them to show them how to use this information." And
yeah, so we definitely so Think Data was founded in April of 2011.
okay,
but I actually started my consulting business probably 15 years ago. And the first project that I did outside of the company that I worked for, I built stuff for the companies that I worked in, but I started my consulting gig, and I built a tax. So it basically accounted for the tax exempt project cost for a commercial construction project that was tax exempt.
Okay. All right.
And it was just a database system that accounted for that, because the traditional system, didn't account for tax exemption. And I just fell in love with the data. I also, from my perspective, I served multiple industries. Data is just data. It doesn't matter if it's, chemical distribution or early childhood analytics or construction. It's just data at the end of the day. And it's just different regulations that are in place, and different levels of data maturity, and, different level of data capture tools, which I would say probably one thing I've seen in the last 15 years is that in the commercial construction industry, there's been a major set of software technology that's been put in place to do some amazing data capture for what's happening on the construction sites. And so,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love all those source systems, but I also like to get all the data out of them.
Well, and that's sort of been one of the challenges, I think, in the construction industry. I think I had some some statistics here. Like here's 30% of engineering and construction companies are using applications that don't integrate with each other. 95% of the data that we capture in construction goes unused, and then 13% of our hours are spent looking for project data and information. And by the way, I think that's really low. If it's only 13% of our time that we spend looking for information, I would be shocked. Or
that's just the looking part. That's not the working with it when you found it.
Doing something right. I don't know, but we've always sort of lived with this siloed information in the construction industry. And, one of the things I always talk about in like most of my courses and anytime I'm presenting is this concept that safety, quality, and productivity are like inextricably linked. You can't neglect one and expect the other two to not suffer. They're going to suffer. Whether they suffer simultaneously or there's a kind of lag effect, that's what's going to happen. And that's always been one of the problems is we've got like some safety data over here, and we got some productivity data over here, and we've got our punch list in this Excel spreadsheet over here. And we've always had a hard time like aggregating that data, pulling it together into one place, and looking at it side by side so that I can see, hey, you know what? I got a lot of near misses, up in this area. So for one, now I know where to. That's great. That's great information because I know where to send my safety manager for the day. But it's also, I really think, good information because I should be looking at it side by side. Like, am I also having some scheduling problems over there? Am I having a bunch of rework over there?
Yeah, now you're talking.
Like probably I am. And if I'm not, I might expect that. So what's changed, I guess, that's, I know one of the things on my side of things that's changed in the construction industry is more tools, better tools to capture data. So I know you call those like the source programs.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Like the Procore, the PlanGrid, the tools that allow us to walk with our phone in the field and capture that near miss or capture that bad behavior or capture that rework item.
Yeah.
So I know that's changed, but what's allowing us to get information out and start using it?
So, okay, my qualifier is you could talk to 100 data people and you would get 100 different answers where there was a little bit in the middle that was the same. So I'll just throw that disclaimer out there. Every data professional might have a different opinion here. So I want to step back just a little bit and say, when you're using dedicated software, it's dedicated for a purpose, right? It specializes in that thing. And that is so valuable. Like we need that.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily we're intentionally siloing our data. It's that this tool does this really well, and this tool does this really well. And those things don't need to marry until the other side, which is the reporting capacity.
Okay.
So I'm a big fan of a special system that like it's kind of like every small business in the world using some form of QuickBooks. Like they have all this other data, but at the end of the day, they have to have an accounting software because of taxes and invoicing and billing. Those are dedicated to what they do. And you're talking about safety, and there's safety data, and then I think it's important to recognize that data has a life. It has a life cycle. It's not alive, then it's alive, and then it's historical. It's
gotcha.
That's kind of crazy like that. But in a commercial construction project, I've never built anything commercial construction, by the way, just supported the data behind it. I'll show that out there. You have, okay, we found it. We want to bid on it. So then you got bid data. Then you have your bid packages. You bid on it. You hope you win it. You win it. You have estimators. Then you have, pre-con, actual construction, in planning, in progress type construction. And then you have actual, like what's happening on the job. It's like there are so many places for data to be captured. And I feel like there are tools that capture all that, and where we lose out in any industry, I don't care what industry it is when you have those and then you don't have the ability to look at them together. So like you said, I'm having scheduling issues over here in this particular, or is it, every time I move this particular crew here or there, those issues are following with them. And then you got to get into like, okay, well, where am I going to, can I leverage my craft workers in a particular geography? These are all things that I feel like most commercial construction companies probably have the data to tell them these things, but they haven't quite, not all of them, but they haven't quite all figured out, like, how do we put it all together? I think Procore is a tool that's used a good bit. And it's strong in trying to collect all these things together. And I think that's great, but there's going to always be something that specializes in something that's not going to talk. And data people don't care about that. We're used to working with systems that are not naturally built together or integrated automatically. Matter of fact, I've always pretty much told my customers, like, if we can at least get it out into Excel, I can make magic happen with it. I don't really care as long as I can get it out. So
I think that's really kind of an important concept. So let's talk about that for a minute, because I think, I talk to particularly smaller companies, whether it's a smaller general contractor, a smaller trade contractor, they're the ones that are still being left behind a little bit on this data collection, analysis, use, and it's because, and what I find, one of the big reasons is they're looking for this one size fits all solution, or this one tool does everything kind of thing. Like we spend a lot of time in the construction industry looking for that one tool that does everything, because I want it all to talk. I don't want to collect my safety, my near misses and my safety observations in this application that's really, really good at doing that, and then collect my submittal information over here in this spreadsheet. I want one tool that does it all, so it can all talk. But when I talk to people like you, that's like the first thing you say is no, that's not right. You don't need to do that.
I can appreciate why you would want that. I just don't believe that that's a realistic goal.
It's not realistic, and it's what holds people up, because they're waiting for that one tool. They don't want to invest in this one that gets them 75% of the things they need. And then, so they're really losing out by waiting for that one tool. And I think that's a good bit of information. Like even you don't need to wait for that tool.
Yeah. Let's just say all of a sudden unicorns pop up and it's rainbows every day, and you find the one system that's the greatest system on earth, and it's going to collect all your data. It only takes one major change in the industry to now all of a sudden you're back to the same place again. So, I don't know. I get it, like intrinsically, I feel it, but I also know from a development standpoint, that's really not a realistic approach. And I think if that's really internally how you're feeling, I would think you maybe need to step back and go, okay, well, what is it that we actually have? And what is it that we actually need? I know, like, when you work in a production company, and like you're producing something, I'll go to the paper mills. Okay, I'll talk about the paper mills. So paper mills produce paper, and every bit of technology goes into producing the paper. Like where you look at where their major investments are going to happen, it's going to happen in what gets more paper off that roll, more paper produced, more pulp created. That's where they're going to spend their investment. And I get it. So I would imagine on a commercial construction site, whatever helps you get that building up faster, safely, and high quality is where you spend your effort. So when you have a software geek come in there and try to sell you a piece of software, it's like, give me the one size fits all. I get it. It just really doesn't happen. There are platforms out there that we leverage. So like, for example, you showed my course links up there earlier, and, people will say, well, why is she teaching that? Okay. Well, if you can understand it in that tool, you can understand it in the higher level tools, right? You don't have to come out of the gate spending the most money on the highest, most branded technology to get started. And I think that's also very important. It just seems so vast, and because it doesn't actually, like, you can't physically watch it make a building come up, it's hard to spend that kind of money on it. So I think it's twofold. It's one, that you want the one size catches all, and you want it to be cheap.
Okay.
So I get that, or inexpensive.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's, one of the comments here. What's the best software to analyze data? I think that's maybe the same issue, right? Is we're looking for that. What's the best software to collect data? Then what's the best software to analyze data? And maybe the starting point is the realization that there's probably no one size fits all tool on either side of that equation.
So what's best for one may not be best for someone else. I know that sounds like a non-answer, but it's really the truth. My first question would be, what data do you have to analyze? And where are you at in what I would consider your data maturity? Like,
sure.
Do you know all the data sets that you have? And also, do you know how often your people in the back, I have a heart for the back office operations in every company we support. So in your back office, like, do you know how much they're reading data from another system and then transposing it into another, or translating it into another? Are we retyping? Do we have golden records anywhere? I think before you start figuring out like what software to purchase, one, identify what software you're already paying for that might help a little bit, and figure out what data sets you have, how can you get them out? What can you do with them if you got them out? And it's like this, well, this one doesn't talk to this one. Well, then you don't have a data person who's looking at it, because data people can make data talk to each other in the background. We do it all the time.
Well, let's talk about those data sets. So here's a comment here, and at some point that said, there's zero communication between departments. And I think that's, I sort of live that in the construction industry all the time, right? With my clients. And it goes towards that, there's data that lives in different departments, right? There's data that lives in different pieces of software, but there's data that lives in these different departments. And I think it's important to recognize that in many, many cases, the data is already there. It's already being captured, right? So I'm paying people, so I must be capturing hours, right? I mean, payroll's got hours.
Yep.
And you mentioned the term data set, which I think might not be necessarily a familiar term to a lot of people in the construction industry. So to me, a data set is like those hours, right? That's a data set.
Yeah.
And if I have near miss, I've got another application, my safety people are walking around recording near misses or unsafe behaviors. That's generating like another data set. Right.
Yep.
And you can go on, RFIs and submittals and all of those things are data sets. And so you as a data person talk about, pulling information from each one of those data sets. And so I wanted to back that up and sort of simplify it just a little bit for those of us that are not familiar with this whole process. And believe me, I've learned a lot in just the last week. I've kind of been talking to you. I have a big client that I do a lot of work with that is kind of has a department doing some of this data set creation. And I noticed that one of the things that they do that's really helpful is, they've got people that are doing what you do, right? So they've got people that are creating reports and creating dashboards. But what I also noticed is those same people are also creating data set libraries, if that's the right term. So I can go in to like the Power BI dashboard, and I can see some analytics and some dashboards that they've already built, but I can also see some data set libraries. So it's got like a library that pulls all of the payroll information out, and it's got another one that pulls all of the project information out of the pre-con software, and it's got one that pulls scheduling information out of like Microsoft Project. And it doesn't do anything with that. It just pulls that data out and puts it in a library. Is that kind of the first step in being able to use that data?
I would say that's a good step in the data.
Okay. All right.
I don't know that it's necessarily the first step. To me, for some of you to get to that point is, you got to start somewhere, and it's not that.
So what is it? Where do you start?
So if I were to sit down with a company who literally had only nothing but data capture tools and the canned reports, the very first thing I would start doing is figuring out, okay, how do I get to the data sets that are stored here? Okay. And then I would be identifying those different data sets and figuring out how they are interrelated to each other for the bigger picture.
Okay.
And I would be looking at my firm and figuring out who's using what pieces of data and where their gaps are. And then I would be enlisting my more data literate folks to figure out, like, hey, how can we tie these things together? I think one of the things is like so you hear people use the term data warehousing.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I don't want to talk about data warehousing in the sense of like software technology and ETL. I want to talk about data warehousing as it's just a collection of all your data from everywhere.
Okay.
You're going to hear terms like data warehouse, data lakes. Even Helen Wall posted something this morning about a lake house, which I was like, I'm in love with this lake house idea.
I saw that,
yeah. But I think the literal step one is, all right, what are you doing right with your data today that is working, that everybody's using, that doesn't need to be touched? And then, and if it's like partially okay, but needs a little bit of this, that's the very first thing I'm going to tackle. Right on down to, do you have a solid list of all of your projects that everybody can actually go pull that project data from? So that it's called one thing, one time, forever. And if it's off, we see it. I think there's a lot of data quality that we lose when we have to have humans in any industry retyping the same thing over and over, because I'm going to type it this way, somebody else is going to type it this way. Yeah. And then you've got, like you said, you've got time and billing. Then you have craft labor, you have subcontractors, and all of those things roll up to a project job level. And you talk about not having communication between departments. Well, if your data was collected and tied together, it would encourage communication, because you could see it you could see your data in a different ways. Like when you don't have something that triggers the conversation because it is so siloed, then the outcome of that is the fact that you don't really have anything to communicate about, but you know, intrinsically you have a ton of things to communicate. It's just no visibility into it. So I think the beginning point is really, first of all, accepting there is no single tool that's going to do everything, and you don't really want that anyway.
Yeah.
And then figuring out, how do you get it out of there? Can you get it out of there? And which approach do you get it out? And then you either skill your workers or you enlist data workers to come in and figure out how to bridge the data, the way to make them talk. And then at that point you get into, okay, now I can provide a golden record list into tools like Power BI.
Okay. All right.
Or any other software X, whatever you want to use.
So in that, I guess, kind of sticking with that getting started thing, I think, you made a great point, right? Like number one is you may be, my takeaway from that is like you may have already started and you just don't know it yet. Like you may already be capturing a lot of data, and so now let's analyze that. But are there mistakes that people can make when they're setting this up? So like one example I had was, most of my bigger clients have started to develop a list of criteria that any software system, anything they look at, has to meet these criteria. And one of the number one things is we have to be able to get our data out. So, there's, and I don't know how common it is anymore, but I know, well, like even Procore, when they started, you really couldn't get your information out. You really couldn't get your data out. There wasn't a great API to pull data. And so you kind of felt like you were putting your information in and you couldn't get it back out. You could use their tools, but you couldn't. So I think that's an important, criteria. Like when you're looking at these data collection tools, make sure that you can get your data out. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. I would say, because again, I've been in this profession for 20 plus years at this point, like, our ability as developers to provide data on the other side has also grown as well as the industry has. So, some of that stuff of the past, you couldn't get your data out is because we didn't have the same flexibility and technology and security that we do today.
Okay.
So I think that's just part of the growth of, the technical industry just in general.
Okay.
But yeah, I would not purchase a piece of software that I couldn't at least get it out in Excel or CSV.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, no, I can't. What? I'm going to do what? Yeah. So some of that stuff that you're talking about is actually a part of an overarching bigger plan called data governance. And, my position has always been, whether you have a formal data governance plan or not, data governance is happening whether you realize it or not.
Okay.
And it may just be that it's a lack of governance. But if you're not in a SOX industry where you're having to be regulated by Sarbanes-Oxley or something like that, you may not have a robust data governance plan. And you go
Absolutely.
Google data governance, you're going to throw up. Like, I'm never going to get started if I stay stuck here. So,
yeah,
just kind of, picking and choosing what makes the most sense, but it really, really, really get practical. Like, where are you hurting in your back office operations based on all the data you're capturing in your production, in your field? Where is that crossover? Where do you feel like you have departments that should be communicating, and not communicating like in weekly meetings, but I'm saying communicating across, like, okay, this job site's had X number of this job site's had X number of delays. Like, we've got issues here and issues there. If you do have a collection or a unified data set where those data have been combined to work together, you can start getting out of the pain that you didn't even know you were in. And then you can look at some of the higher level tools and technologies and analysis. Another thing, we hear big data all the time. Okay, well, big data started out with one definition and it's just grown every year. That's another thing. Some of you really don't have big data. It's big to you, but it's really not that big. You start getting in payroll data, that's like small to medium data sets, depending on how old you are. Like when you were talking about wearable technologies, like if you're going to put a wearable on every craft laborer person on the job site, that gets into big data pretty fast.
Okay. All right.
You know what I mean? So that's fun and fascinating. And you can use the tools, and they have all the stuff that you can monitor and watch, and you need that information and communicate it, but you don't necessarily need to pull it out to increase your production per se.
Gotcha.
So yeah, just understanding like how much data do you really have? A data salesperson, which technically I sort of am, but I'm kind of like take it or leave it. But a data salesperson is going to come into you and tell you, if you don't do this X, Y, Z, you need to do it this way. You're going to have all these heavy investments, and then you're going to be right back to where we started, which is, what data do you have? How do we get it out? And how do we make them talk? Like, no collection of data ever begins without that conversation happening first. So you can really get ahead of it if you have that conversation internally. You probably have some pretty data literate people in your organizations that, they would probably love an opportunity to tell you about the data that they wish they had access to.
Yeah. And so that's a good point. Like, what can these companies do on their own? So you've got a lot of companies that again, maybe they're smaller, maybe they're just not sure what they want. They're not sure where to start, but, I know plenty of companies that are, they've invested in Procore, they've got that tool. They're using it to gather rework information and some safety information. And, they've also got obviously payroll data. They're maybe using another application for their pre-con stuff, and they're using something for scheduling. So they've got the data, right? Like they're entering the data. And they want to take the next step. Is it possible for them to do it on their own, or to at least get started on their own? I mean, can they watch your courses and sort of learn how to do it on their own? Is there, at what point do they need to bring somebody else in?
No, that's a good question.
There was a question here. Let me see if I can pop it up. It's not easy to start a data project because it's not easy to show return on investment. What do you think about return on investment proof for the decision makers? And I know for me and my clients, that's a tough one for me. I'm not a data person, number one, and number two, it is really hard to show. I don't know if it's really hard. I think it's challenging to show, like, here's how much you're going to improve if you start aggregating this data and analyzing this data. Other than, I know one of the things I have used is, well, your people are probably spending whatever it is, 10% of their time, 13% of the time, whatever that statistic was, looking for data. So if they're wasting 4, 5, 6 hours a week looking for data, and we can solve, even if we can just solve that problem, that's pretty valuable. That's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, I think you have to get right down to those root calculations, but that takes a conversation with your back office people about where they're dying in the data or lack of it. And since that doesn't have anything to do with the field, but has everything to do with supporting it, it's like a hard sell. So I think you have to so I would believe intrinsically decision makers know, where they're feeling pain points.
Okay.
And so if you're bringing this would be something I would tell any new data analyst, like if you're bringing this fancy data project over and it's not solving a pain point or not providing some type of information for informed decision making, they are not going to care, and they're not going to care. And you could say, well, I can save Sally, XYZ. If it doesn't solve a problem, they don't care. And I would be the same way.
Yeah.
So, I think one of the harder things is identifying where can you add value, but it just takes like a discussion, like, having a what if discussion, like forget everything you don't have, you've got gaps, you need unified data, you need data warehousing, but like, what do you not have? And if you had all of the things fancy and it was single source, like one place to go, what could you do with it? I think that's a valuable conversation to have. Like, maybe we could identify where, who what are the best subcontractors that we've worked the best with? We've had the best project performance. Our people work on what are the time and billing across that project? Where do we make our money? Where do we lose our money? And being able to look at that, like, it doesn't take long to figure out, well, if this group is geographically close here and we worked well with them and everything worked out like we thought it was going to work out between estimate, bid, and production, like, we get another one in this particular geography, that's stuff you can look at and see. And there is return on investment because, they're geographically close, you've had good performance with them. Yeah, I don't know. There's just a lot of little areas. That's an easier one to have with a particular company than to have just a universal answer that fits for everybody. But for a data worker, data professional, if you're not solving a problem with data, nobody is going to care. I don't care what industry it is.
Yeah. Don't.
No, it just looks like
don't create dashboards
fucking money. Yeah, please, God, dashboards. Dashboards are amazing, and they start a conversation, and they can, just like driving your car, like tell you, I need to get gas. Okay, but there's way more to data intelligence and business intelligence than just the dashboard or the report.
Yeah.
And then, like, I know a lot of companies, they love to, and it doesn't matter, again, this is not industry specific, they love to have their paper reports. It's because that's what they're used to. They look at, and you lose the dynamic capability. So, that's another thing I would assess is how much are we looking at stuff on paper?
Yeah.
And what do we lose because we're not able to, maybe it's not the decision maker mining that data, but maybe it's, a pretty effective project manager or one of your field engineers or whatever, looking at what's being produced every day. So
yeah.
It's a big topic.
Well, and I think, I don't know, as you were talking, I thought, like you said, it is hard to have that one size fits all conversation about return on investment. But as you were talking, you mentioned a couple things that kind of queued up in my mind. And, one of the ongoing big problems that we have in construction is rework. And rework happens for a lot of different reasons, right? We didn't have the right set of drawings. They got updated yesterday, and I had the plans from 2 weeks ago. They get, we have rework because of damage. I put too many people working in that area and damaged the last trade's drywall, and they got to come back. We just, rework is a huge problem in the construction industry, and for everybody. And nobody's going to convince me that it's not a problem for their company. It's a problem in the construction industry. So maybe, that's a good example or good thing to cue in on as far as data analysis in the construction industry. If you can start to solve the rework problem, or even start to identify the rework problem, right? So why on our projects are we having so much rework in X or in Y? That is really valuable information, and that you could probably start to really zero in on a return on investment. Like, what data do we need in order to analyze rework, and what's going to help us fix it? And if we fix it, it starts to become pretty easy to see how much money you're going to save. And it's not just money, because you're spending hours on rework and new material, but you're also you're lengthening the schedule. So, the project schedule's going out. And then if I have to do something twice instead of once, obviously my risk exposure is times 2, right? If I don't have to put them out there the second time to do rework, I don't have another exposure. So, maybe that I don't know, if I pick something, rework is a good area in construction to focus. What kind of return on investment can we get? Well, if I can use data to help me solve rework issues, I can start to see a bunch of dollars there, really quickly.
Definitely.
I don't know.
So we're working and developing a tool that I don't know if it would tell you more information about rework. I hadn't really thought about it in that phrasing, but this is an area like, okay, well, we know what was supposed to happen on the job site. And we're hoping to feed that like expected plan over to a person through, a digital format, it's a piece of software. And, did it happen? Why didn't it happen? Did you plan for 4 men over there and you only have 2? Did you hit your goals, not hit your goals? These are things where if a system doesn't exist and you need one, that's where you begin to look and go, okay, well, how can I leverage what I have in today?
Okay.
And if you're using tools like Microsoft Power BI, then it's not a far leap to expect that you probably have SharePoint capability that could be leveraged. Sure. You have Power Apps capability that could be leveraged. So, part of it is figuring out, okay, now we've got this data, we figured out, we've brought somebody in, or we figured out in our team like how to make a kind of talk. And now we figured out we're not really getting this piece of data. Well, if you've got a golden record, then you can feed other systems that go, okay, well, this person's working on project X, this is what they should see. And you can build little systems within your own environment. But if you have a unified place or a data warehouse or a data lake or whatever, like you have a place to put all of that extra information and tie it with all of your source information. I just think it could be super valuable. But it sounds like a bunch of software speak, and then you get, the shiny people in selling data warehousing tools. Again, I go back to, what do you have? How do you get it out? And what problem does it solve? And I think that is probably the most practical conversation any company in any industry can actually have. And then once you have it even unified, not even fancy data warehousing, just unified, you can do so much with it that you've never been able to do before. Like, you may be able to like really leverage it a lot until you get to where you need the bigger, more comprehensive systems. So.
Okay. Yeah. And so you and I, as we were getting ready for this, we were talking about a report that you were working on that, pulls some different data for a client, and gives them some intelligence when they go out and visit their job site. And then when we got off the line, I sort of logged into a couple of the data information systems that I have access to for some of my clients, and looking at some simple reports and what does it take to get to that report. And I found one kind of similar to what, it sounded like you were working on. And that is just this simple report of, where are my projects? And so this is a kind of a national general contractor, and the question is just really simple. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona today. Where are my projects in Phoenix? Who's the owner? What's the value of the project? Where am I at? Percentage of complete on the project? Who are my employees that are at the project, and how much time have they spent on the project? Right? That's, to me, that's a very simple set of information. That seems like I should know that for every project.
It's simple, but it isn't at the same time.
It isn't, right. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the way a lot of companies get that is somebody in the office is looking up all of that information, right? And they're typing it into the spreadsheet or the report that some management person is going to use later to find that information, but done correctly. And the reason for that is because project information lives one place, percent complete lives over, here in the scheduling or the accounting, hours worked is in payroll, people on the project is over here in this system. It's all there. The company has all the data. There's no
every bit of it.
And so you mentioned when you and I were talking, that's when you're doing stuff like that, when you have people in the office that are manually pulling that information up on their screen, or like, God forbid, looking at a paper report, and then they're duplicating it and combining it manually, like that's when it's probably time to start looking at how to use our data better.
Oh yeah, I mean, you don't even have to put in high-level systems to solve that problem. I mean,
right, but it was interesting because I looked at all the data so for this one simple report, which I really think is a simple report, but it's a really valuable report. For that one simple report, it was pulling data from 5 different sources.
Yep.
And it wasn't, I kind of started to look at the back end, and it didn't seem, and it's all done in I think Microsoft Power BI, and it wasn't complicated, but each one of those systems had to have some way of extracting the information, and then putting that information into a data set, and then the Power BI tool kind of pulls it all together and generates the report from you. But the to me, in the construction industry, one of the things that is really valuable that I don't want people to overlook out there in the field is that when you do a report that way, it's dynamic, right? So if somebody changes one piece of information in one of those systems, it populates to that report. So when I pull up that report, the report is always as accurate as the system is.
Yep.
And in construction, that is not always the case. In construction, we have spent years and decades pulling up reports that were generated yesterday, and after they were generated, 25 things changed, and today I'm pulling up that report, and it's essentially almost a useless report because it's already outdated.
Yeah, this is why unifying your data in whatever way you want to do it, data collection, data warehouse, whatever technology you pick, you get some of the real time, we're moving Joe from here to here, and all of a sudden somebody presses a button and everybody knows it. And so nobody's operating off of old information. I think we need to make a very a distinguishment. Simple to read is not the same as simple to build.
Right.
And where you want to make your data investment is in the literacy and skill. You want to pick data workers who know how to tie that information together so that it can be a simple to read report. And yes, you're going to get interactivity. You're going to get, the things we've experienced throughout our career has been, we go in to solve one problem. And then what they get on the outside of it is the ability to solve multiple problems using the same thing over and over and over and over again. So you may have a little bit heavier investment up front, but then you're going to gain so much from it that you didn't even, it's like you don't know how sick you are until you're well.
Yeah.
And then at some point you turn around and you go, how in the world did I ever live without this stuff? Yeah. But it is hard because, again, this is ugly to say, but a lot of people have bought software and they were sold a bill of goods.
Yep.
And when they got the software, it really didn't meet what was supposed to happen. And so it's really hard to like, trust all technical people, but we are not all the same. And if you have data and good source systems, you need those source systems because they're specialized. But if you can get the data out, data workers, data professionals, little data engineering in there, we can make those systems intelligent and make them talk and interact with each other and really give you a big bang for your buck. But if you go buy all the technology up front and then you're spending, wads of dollars, and we're all back to the same conversation, which is what do you have?
Yeah.
How do you get it out? And what are your problems? So I feel like I've said that 8 times, but I think tweet it later that I said simple to read is not the same as simple to build.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. Like I said, looking at what I consider to be that very simple report, once you start to drill down and realize how many sources it's pulling from to get that data, it clearly took a lot to build that report. But then the value is that, I had some investment up front to, figure out how to pull the data sets, how to combine them, and how to make that report. But now I'm done. And I can use that report over and over again. I don't have to change. I can continue to use my source solutions, my data collection solutions, and I can continue to use that report forever, right? So it is. I don't, and it doesn't even really need a whole lot of maintenance, unless source systems change, and then maybe you've got to do a little.
This is where having data professionals comes in. Like, we can. You can spend a lot of overhead making things happen, right? Like, okay, so you got so-and-so over here, and they're going to load this spreadsheet, and it's going to update this Power BI report, and it's going to be beautiful. And then they're going to make changes, and they're going to load that spreadsheet. And then somebody comes in and adopts that job, and then they change that spreadsheet, and then the reports don't work.
The reports don't work.
And that's okay, because we can go identify what happened and fix it, right? We can read through these crazy error messages that don't make sense to other humans, and we can fix that.
Gotcha.
But once you have figured out, I need this data and it needs to be in this report, and you've done that across your departments, then warehousing professionals can come in and go, okay, if you do that before, then you save a lot of money on that project getting all the reports you need, even if it's not elegant. If you have nothing and you start really high up, you get right back down to, okay, we don't even know where everything is. So I mean, even though there's a lot of overhead that goes in with loading spreadsheets, Microsoft Office 365 and the Power Platform are just that. They are platform tools that you could be leveraging to stop some of the bleeding in some of the places. So significant tools and capability there that I would encourage all humans to look at.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, is that Microsoft 360 platform has a lot of incredible capabilities. I think many, maybe I'll go out on a limb and say most construction, engineering, architecture firms are already they're already paying for that.
You already have it. You just don't necessarily know when you need to use it.
Yeah, if you bring a data person in, they may be able to really tell you how to get the most of something that you're already paying for.
I'm all about that. Let's leverage the dollars. You've already made the investment and it's just sitting there. Like, that's another thing too. Like, every customer we work with, we have that discussion. Is like, do we really need to buy any more software? Yeah. Or can we, and sometimes you're just modeling for the future system.
Sure.
But that modeling has to occur regardless of what point you go for a larger system. Like, somebody has to model that data to communicate. And things like Power Automate, Power BI, all of that stuff, and the Power Platform, like, my team and the stuff that they've built in Power Apps for commercial construction blow my mind. What they've built for forecasting and stuff for chemical distribution is ridiculous. And I'm like, we didn't have any additional software costs because they were already paying for it.
So Charlie had as we kind of start to get towards the end of the hour, Charlie had a question here. let's see, what are some of the connections between these data sets or analysis dashboards that you think provide the most value for contractors that you've worked with? And I know for me, this is always a difficult one. I wanted to come on and show a bunch of examples from my clients, but of course, they don't really want me to flash their data up on the screen, right? That would probably not go over well. But do you have any, can you share any general examples of, maybe what construction companies can do or have done as you pull these data sets together? Is that it's a tough question,
it's hard to it's super hard.
I'm trying to think of an answer on my end too.
Yeah.
But.
Well, and also like what I would think might be important for them may not be what they're looking at or thinking about. We do work with Procore data, and Procore has some beautiful Power BI reports that we're able to work and customize and add to.
Okay.
The ability to add to those reports, to add other things, that's where the ability to gain connections to other data becomes super valuable to you. Because then you're going like everybody wants one place, so you have one place to go. Leveraging SharePoint.
Maybe adding, connecting those reports to data related to hours worked and things like that, which you may not be collecting in Procore. And being able to add that to the Procore.
Yeah, anything that's not already in there that you collect somewhere else, like being able to figure out how to flow that data to those reports, add to the reports, add tabs to the reports.
Okay.
I mean, you could do anything. Like it's like data is just data. It's just this data is about safety, and this data is about sustainability, and this data is about project sites, and this data is about payroll. But at the end of the day, it's fields of information that are text, numbers, currency, dates. I mean, it's yes or no's. It's all still data. So yeah, I mean, leveraging things like that. I think that, SharePoint got a bad rap in the beginning of its life because it was like a document repository. So it's hard, but it's really a critical component of the platform capability. So even just little things there gives you, doing a SharePoint list, and people, like I spent years telling people what the difference between a list and a document library is. It's like one holds the document, one holds, it's like basically Excel in the sky.
Sure.
Yeah, I think just really getting an idea of what the Power Platform, if you're an Office 365 user, like what do you got, and what could you leverage there, and just having an open conversation about, it sucks that I don't have this data. Like, and your people are just dying in it. I know, like if your decision makers all got together and sat down with the people who look stressed out all the time, but still have smiles on their faces, they'd give you a lot of insight into what data they're touching all the time. And that helps bring back the pain point. But again, if you're a new data worker, or you're on the job site and you're pretty excited about data and you're not solving a problem, you're doing nothing but spinning your wheels.
Yeah.
So really critically think through, like, how do I solve a problem, and where is the data at in all these different places? Yeah.
Well, we got a couple comments like this. So your quote, your tweet quote that you're gonna tweet out later. People like that quote. So
simple to read does not mean simple to build.
Yeah, that's right. As we're at the top of the hour here, got any final thoughts? Any final words of wisdom that we haven't already extracted from you?
I was reading Charlie's comment in here. Where do you see data analysis moving the needle in the construction industry? Imagine the ability to have real-time productivity rates, percentage complete, when we start using laser scanner compared to plant. Yeah, I mean, I think it could, what's innovative for one may not be innovative for everyone, but data analysis, there's no doubt. And like, you don't even have to do statistical data analysis. Just analyzing and even really looking at your data in a collection, unified, really moves the needle forward. And if it does nothing else but start the internal communication between departments so that you perform better, faster, and more aware, I would say that's moving the needle.
Okay. All right. Well, great. I really appreciate you joining me today. I think this has been a great conversation. I think we're probably going to have to do this one or two more times and expand a little bit. I appreciate all the comments that we got throughout the program. There have been several that have asked about, where to find your courses, where to find your website. I threw up your LinkedIn profile.
Thank you.
That probably has
please follow
everything.
me. Yeah, everything in there.
Is
I
there
would
another
say
website?
thinkdatasoul.com is the company website. Don't judge it. Because we support other people's data, and our website may not be, it's okay. I never love it. I would say probably the learning data analytics course. The first one is about an hour and a half, 2-hour watch. Very worthwhile to build your data literacy. It's using tools you have access to. And then really, if you want to just pick one topic in one of my courses, my newest course, learning data analytics, the foundations, watch the one about the data lens. I think that could be hugely impactful because it shows you how to look and see the world around you in the form of data sets. So I think it may be the identifying data. So cool. Well, thanks a lot for having me. I'll come back anytime you want me to.
Thanks for joining us, and everybody else. Hope to see you next week. Again, every Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thoughts from the field, and we'll see you then. Thank you.